Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I've got something a bit different for you. Today I'm going to talk about 50 books that I'm going to read before I turn 50. So before we start, this is not a list of 50 books you should read before you turn 50. This is a list of 50 books I am going to read before I turn 50. So there are some classics on here, and in fact many of these books are books that are books I've wanted to read for a long time and thought I should read for a long time, and not just because they are classics or what have you, but because I'm genuinely interested in them. But there are also some books on here which many people would not consider to be suitable books to put on a 50 before you're 50 kind of a list. So that's the first thing to note. The second thing to note is I haven't got very long. So depressingly, I turned 50 at the end of April 2023. So I've got 4 months. I'm going to start this from the beginning of January. So I've got 4 months to get through these 50 books. So I have, to an extent, chosen them with that in mind, or at least that's been a consideration. So there are a couple of really big books on here, but I've tried to go with some shorter ones. So where, for example, there's an author that I've never tried that I'm interested in trying, I've tried to pick one of their shorter books than one of their longer ones. What I've also done deliberately is woven in some of the other challenges I am doing at the moment. So I am doing this Disturbing Books project at the moment, where I'm reading disturbing books that were recommended to me, and I'm also doing reading through a list of 12 classic books that were recommended by Michael K. Vaughan in a video he did. So I've got a couple of those in here, and I'm also in 2023 going to be reading through Patricia Highsmith's complete bibliography with Anne Novella. So there's some Patricia Highsmith on here as well. But these are all books that I felt were books I was justified in putting on this list. I haven't put them on here just to make up the numbers. And indeed there are, I will still be continuing to do those projects and read books from those projects outside of this list. So these 50 books definitely won't be everything I read in the first 4 months of next year. Right, so that's the kind of preamble nonsense out of the way. Let's get on with the list. So this list is in no order whatsoever. You can't see me, well, you can see me, but you can't see around me. But the room is in something of chaos because I've had to get loads of books off the shelves. I'm going to keep them off the shelves. I'm going to keep them on my TBR cart. But I then need to find other books to go on the shelves to fill the holes. And there's also a lot of Kindle books on here. So one of the things I did in preparing for this was just go through my list of all my Kindle books, of which there are thousands, and pick out ones that I haven't read yet, that were ones I felt I needed to get to, including one that I bought in 2013, which I still haven't read. So anyway, I will go through the list. It might be a bit chaotic because there are piles of books everywhere, but we'll see how we go. So first up then, and as I say, these are in no particular order. They're not grouped in any way because I just haven't had time to do that. So it's a bit of a random hodgepodge of things. So anyway, here we go. First book, If This Is a Man by Primo Levi. His account of the Holocaust, supposed to be one of the best works about the Holocaust, which clearly is a really important subject that we need to remember and learn about. So really interested to read that. Next up, so I'm not going to read this whole book, but from this, the big book of the Continental Op by Dashiell Hammett, Red Harvest. So in this actually has the original magazine published instalments of Red Harvest, where it was published as The Cleansing of Poisonville. So that's what I'm going to be reading rather than the novel of Red Harvest that was later published. But I believe it's pretty much the same. Recommended to me by so many people. Red Harvest have been recommended by loads of people, and I am keen to read the rest of the Continental Op stories at some point, but I thought I'd start with Red Harvest as that had been so highly recommended. Next then, one of the books from Michael K. Vaughan's list of 12 classics, and a book I've always meant to read and I've never got round to, and it is big, so we'll see how I do, but that is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, which probably needs no introduction. Next then, something very different. So The Second Suspect by H.E. Lewis. So this is the book that in a way accompanies Noticed by Heather Lewis, which I read in the past year, which I thought was an absolutely fantastic book. So that is a book about a young woman kind of going through horrific abuse. This, I believe, is a book about a detective investigating, well, I think maybe the same case, or certainly a very similar case. Heather Lewis, I think, based on the one book I've read by her, is a really fantastic author. So really keen to see what this one's like. Next up, we have Street Players by Donald Goines. So I read one of Donald Goines' books this year, his last book, and thought it was absolutely fantastic. Immediately picked up a load of other books by him and haven't managed to read any of them yet. So really keen to see what this is like. But he was a huge voice in kind of black crime fiction in the 70s. And as I say, the book I read by him, Inner City Hoodlum, I thought was really, really excellent. So yeah, looking forward to giving that one a try. Next, an author I've been meaning to read for years and just have never got round to. And that's Hubert Selby Jr. So the one that I've got by him is The Room, which is supposed to be perhaps his most disturbing work. Clearly he's somebody who wrote quite a few disturbing books, so interested to see how I get on with that one. And that is for my Disturbing Books project, I should say, as well. Next, The Real Cool Killers by Chester Himes. So I read Rage in Harlem a couple of months ago, the first of his Harlem cycle of crime novels, and absolutely loved it. Himes is a really important author, I think, in the history of American crime fiction. So definitely fitting for the channel, and definitely an author I want to read more of. So looking forward to that. Next we have Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. So another book I'm reading from the Disturbing Books project. I'm really keen to read more McCarthy because I've read a few things by him. So I've read The Robe, which I loved. I've read All the Pretty Horses, which I hated. And then read Blood Meridian, which I thought was excellent. So I'm keen to see how I get on with Child of God. It's one of his shorter ones. But yeah, I still haven't figured out with McCarthy if he's an author I really like or really don't like. So we'll give that a try and see what I think of it. Next up, another one for the Disturbing Books project, Haunted by Jack Palahniuk. So I've only read Fight Club by him. He's an author I've always meant to go back to and have never got round to it. Haunted, I think, is a short story collection. So we'll see what I think of that. Next we have a horror novel, again one I've been meaning to read for ages, Geek Love by Katherine Dunn, which has been heavily recommended by a few people whose opinions I really respect. One of those books, as I say, it's always been on my radar to read it, but just never got round to it, so I'm going to make sure I cross that off the list. Next we have The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick. So Philip K. Dick was an author I absolutely loved in my teens and 20s, and then haven't read that much of recently. I read The Man in the High Castle a little while ago and really loved it. So yeah, really keen to read some more Philip K. Dick. And this is one I didn't read back in the 80s and 90s when I was really into him. So yeah, a fantastic science fiction writer, really weird, but always incredibly inventive and interesting. Next, we have a book I am not sure if I actually want to read or not, but we'll see. That is Hogg by Samuel R. Delany. Supposed to be one of the most troubling and disgusting and horrific books ever written. So yeah, we'll see what I make of that. So that is for the Disturbing Books project. But I figure it's a book I need to read. I think once I pass 50, I'll just be too old for that kind of stuff. So definitely need to get it in before I'm 50. Next, a book from one of my favourite authors, Stephen King. So Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. So The Shining is one of my favourite books of all time, certainly my favourite King book of all time. I did try and read the sequel when it first came out, and just I only managed the first chapter and then put it down and picked up something else. So I definitely need to get through this and see what I think of it. Right, next, a classic noir, which I haven't read, and I haven't read anything by this author. And I really need to. So the book is In a Lonely Place by Dorothy B. Hughes. So one of those kind of domestic noirs from I don't know if it's from the 40s or 50s, but back when domestic noirs really were noir rather than whatever it is they are nowadays. So yeah, really keen to read that one, and it comes highly recommended again. Next we have The Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. So I think I've only read The Day of the Triffids by Wyndham, which was brilliant. So a British science fiction writer. I need to read more by him. Midwich Cuckoos is one of his many classics, but perhaps he's probably his second best well-known book after Day of the Triffids. So yeah, really keen to read that. Next, Bomber by Len Deighton. His novel about a bombing crew bombing Germany during the Second World War. So both about them and on the people who are being bombed. This is a book my dad recommended to me years and years ago, and I've never got to it. It's supposed to be absolutely excellent. Doing a buddy read of this in January with one of my subscribers, DDB. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Next, okay, this one is a classic. So there's been lots of books I've talked about here which are classics of the kind of thing that I read, definitely fitting for the channel, and one of the reasons I want to read a lot of these books is just to expand my knowledge of the genres that I love, so crime and horror. But this one is a definite classic, and that is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. So I've read a few of Steinbeck's shorter things. So I've read of Mice and Men and Cannery Row, and really enjoyed both of those. Grapes of Wrath obviously is probably his best known book, and supposed to be fantastic, so keen to dive into that. Next we have, so there's a few books here which are like the first books in long running crime series that I've just never managed to get to. So yeah, there's a few of those, and I figured I would just try the first book in a load of different series and see where I got to, and I've got all these books on my Kindle already. In fact, with many of these series, I've actually got the whole series on my Kindle because I picked it up during a deal. And that is the case for this one. So this is Faceless Killers by Henning Mankell, the first of the Wallander books. So supposed to be a fantastic detective series, but as I say, I've never read it. Okay, next another one that's the first in the series, albeit a much shorter series. So this is 1974 by David Peace, the first book in his Red Riding Quartet. So set in the 70s and 80s in the northern UK. Supposedly an absolutely fantastic crime series. So looking forward to that. More crime next. So this was, and apologies because I forget who recommended it to me, but it was recommended by a subscriber in a comment on one of my videos. So this apparently is the first African American crime novel. The Conjure Man Dies by Rudolph Fisher from the 1930s. So really interested to see what this is like, and interested as well to see how Fisher as an author kind of fits in with Chester Himes and Donald Goines, who I've talked about already in this video. Next, Horns by Joe Hill. So I've had this for quite a while. Supposed to be one of his best books. I've read two of his books. So I've read The Fireman, which I thought was okay, and Nosferatu, which I really liked. So yeah, keen to read this. I think the concept is really interesting, and Joe Hill, clearly is one of the bigger voices in horror at the moment. So I do need to read more by him. Next, a classic noir author who I've only read, I think, one book by. That's David Goodis. So I have this lovely Library of America edition. I couldn't decide which one to read. There's 5 of his books in here, so I thought I'd just go with the first one, which is Dark Passage. So, based on what I've read by Goodis, a fantastic author. Really interested to see what I make of him as I read more of his work. Moving on then. So a classic, fairly modern science fiction novel, again one I've had for ages and just haven't got around to, and that's Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. So I've never read any Neil Stephenson. I think this is one of his shorter ones because some of his books are huge. So yeah, I thought I would give Snow Crash a go and see what I make of it, and supposed to be quite prescient as well. I think it kind of in some ways predicts the metaverse and things like that. Next, another book by a favourite author of mine. So I talk often on the channel about Ed McBain and his 87th Precinct series. Ed McBain's real name was Evan Hunter, and as Evan Hunter he wrote this book, The Blackboard Jungle, which was very famously filmed with Sidney Poitier. Supposed to be excellent. I think it may be a book that is not dated brilliantly, but as a big Ed McBain / Evan Hunter fan, it's definitely one I want to read. Moving on, we have some more classic crime. So The Beast in View by Margaret Miller from this Women Crime Writers collection from Library of America. So this is a suspense novel from the 50s. I don't know very much about it at all. But yeah, really, really keen to read it. Really keen to try Margaret Miller. I've heard great things about her, but I've never read her. Right, where have we got to? Okay, next up, a British author. Again, an author I've read a couple of books by. So I've read Travels with My Aunt, which I didn't like, and Brighton Rock, which I loved. So both obviously by Graham Greene. So I can read his classic spy novel, The Quiet American, and see what that's like. He's an author who I think is interesting in that he's a literary author, but plays around with kind of crime and thriller themes a lot. So keen to see what I make of that. Next up, so I have been reading the Philip Marlowe books for a while on the channel. So I have the fourth of those, The Lady in the Lake, to read. So that will be another one I get in before I'm 50. Another classic crime author, and indeed a classic crime novel next. So Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. So I've read a bunch of Agatha Christie books and have talked about her a few times on the channel. I really like her, but this is one I haven't read, and it's one of the best known ones. So I thought I'd fit that in as well. Next, a horror western by an author I really like but haven't read that much by. And that's Joel Lansdale, and the book is The Thicket. So that's another one I've had on my Kindle for a while. Has been recommended to me recently by a number of different people, and I've always enjoyed Lansdale's writing, so we'll see what I make of that. Next, two books by Becky Chambers. So I'm a huge fan of Becky Chambers' Wayfarers series, so 4 science fiction novels she wrote. Absolutely love it, recommend it all the time to people. I also really liked her standalone novella, to be taught if fortunate. I nearly forgot the name there, but I haven't read either of the books in her new series, the Monk and Robot series. So I've got both of those, and they are Psalm for the Wild Built and Prayer for the Crown Shy. So looking forward to both of those. More classic crime next. Double Indemnity by James M. Cain. So I read The Postman Always Rings Twice earlier this year and loved it. Really keen to read more Cain, so we'll see how I get on with that one. Okay, we're getting there. This is book 34, the next one. 33. So, The Crow Road by Ian Banks. So I was a huge Ian Banks fan in my teens. The Crow Road came out, I think, when I was probably about 19 or 20, and it was one of those books that it was kind of his breakout book. It was a book that everyone was talking about when it came out. There was a BBC TV adaptation of it, and in a way, I think his suddenly becoming really popular spoiled him for me. I quite liked enjoying his books, but people not really talking about him that much. So as soon as people started going on about him, I got less interested. But I've always meant to go back and read The Crow Road, so I've got it on my Kindle, and it's another one I will get to. Next, a fantasy classic, The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. So I read the first 2 books of the Lord of the Rings trilogy earlier this year. Really enjoyed the first one. Struggled through the second one. Half of it I liked, half of it I didn't like. So I'm hoping that it all comes together successfully, and I enjoy this final volume completely. I'm sure I will. Everybody raves about it. So yes, I need to finish the Lord of the Rings trilogy before I'm 50. So next up, another book that is the first in the series. This is Cover Her Face by P.D. James, the first of her Adam Dalgleish mysteries. So I've never read any of P.D. James's mysteries, I don't think. I've read other books by her, but not any of the Dalgleish books. So keen to see what he's like. And again, as with the Wallander books, I think I've got all of the Dalgleish books on my Kindle. So if I enjoy it, I've got more to read. Okay, next, something that wouldn't appear on many people's 50 books to read before your 50 list. Casca, God of Death by Barry Sadler. So the Casca series of books was one I was really aware of as a kid, but I've never read any of them, and they're supposed to be a lot of fun. So Casca is a Roman soldier who's immortal for some reason, I'm not sure why, and fights in battles throughout the ages. So this looks like a hell of a lot of fun, and definitely the kind of thing I enjoy on the channel. Next, another horror author that I haven't read anything by and really need to. So Adam Neville. So I have his book Cunning Folk. I've also got another book of his on my Kindle, but I thought I'd go with this one because it's folk horror, and I'm also interested in reading a bit more folk horror because it's a subgenre of horror I haven't read an awful lot of. Adam Neville seems to be an author that people really, really rate. So keen to see what I make of that. Okay, next, another very highly rated crime series that I've never read. That is the Martin Beck series by Marge Chauvel and Per Wallou. I'm probably completely butchering those names. So this is Rosanna, the first book in the series. I've got the whole series on my Kindle, so if I like it, I've got plenty more to read. But yeah, keen to see what the fuss is all about with Martin Beck. Next, Crash by J.G. Ballard, his classic kind of erotic horror novel. Is it an erotic horror novel? I don't know. It's a horrible book with sex in it. So yeah, I've had this for a while. It was written in my birth year, funnily enough, 1973. So it feels extra fitting to read it before I turn 50. But yeah, looking forward to this. I've heard great things about it, and I need to watch the Cronenberg film as well. Okay, next, two more books that are the first in their respective crime series. So the first of those is the Godwolf manuscript by Robert B. Parker, the first of the Spencer novels. So I think I've read a couple of the later Spencer novels, but not the first one. And also Burglars Can't Be Choosers by Lawrence Block, which is the first of his Bernie Rodenbach books, which again are supposed to be fantastic. I've heard great things about them. I really like Lawrence Block's Matt Scudder books, so keen to see him working with another character and how he gets on with them. Next up, three of the Patricia Highsmith books that I talked about. So as I said, I'm reading through her whole bibliography. I've already read, but will reread her first book, Stranger on a Train. So I haven't included that for this list, but I will reread that. And we'll also be reading The Blunderer, which is also in this Library of America edition. The Price of Salt and Deep Water. Next, two books with yellow in the title, both of which are supposed to be kind of classics of horror. So The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers and The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I know very little about either of those books other than they're both supposed to be fantastic. So I'll see how I get on with them. We are nearly at the end, so we have 4 books to go. So next we have Kin by Keelan Patrick Burke. So another one of those horror authors who's like really well respected at the moment, but I just haven't read anything by. This is the book that I've had on my Kindle since 2013, so I really need to get to it. I think it was one of the first books I bought on Kindle. So yeah, definitely keen to read that. Next, another British horror author who I haven't read enough by. So I've read a fair few things by Ramsey Campbell, but not enough. This is his classic short story collection, Demons by Daylight, which is supposed to be brilliant. And that brings us to the final two. So Thomas Ligotti, another horror author I've just never read. I hadn't even heard of Thomas Ligotti before I started doing BookTube, but supposed to be a really unsettling and fantastic author. So this Penguin Classics edition has 2 of his short story collections. I'm going to be reading just one of them, Songs of a Dead Dreamer. And then finally, an author I've been meaning to read more of for ages. So I've read a few books by him. But what I want to do is read his books in order, and in particular the George Smiley series. So you're going to be reading the first of those, Call for the Dead by John le Carré, so the classic British espionage writer. So yeah, really looking forward to digging into this whole big volume, which has got, I think, 5 books in it. So yes, we'll be reading the first of these before I turn 50 anyway. Right, I'm not going to do a random book from the shelves today because I've been talking far too long. You probably all need a rest. My voice definitely needs a rest. But yeah, I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read any of the 50 books I talked about. Let me know what you thought of them. Please, if you've got other recommendations for books I should read, don't leave them in the comments because it took me ages to come up with this list. And it is a list of, clearly, because I'm doing the Read What You Own challenge at the moment, these are all books I already own. So there's a reasonable chance if you did suggest something else, it would be a book I don't own. So this is one occasion where I'm not looking for suggestions. But yeah, if you read any of the books, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know if there's any you think I should read sooner in the challenge rather than later. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I've got, as I say, just over 4 months, or well, 4 months from the start of January, before my 50th. So hopefully I can get through all of these, and hopefully you'll enjoy going on that journey with me. We will see how I do. But yeah, as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.